My next life as a villainess, all routes lead to doom. Volume 11. Chapter 3, Maria's Hometown. The next morning I woke up well rested and happy that I knew how much longer the game's plot was going to last. I managed to withstand Keith's newfound sexiness that had given me so much trouble the day before and smoothly headed to the magical ministry. Once I got off the carriage, as I was on my way to the magical tool laboratory, I saw someone from behind someone who I hadn't spoken to in a while. "Good morning, Dewey." I called him. Dewey Percy, being only 13 years old, was younger than me, but we had joined the ministry at the same time. He had done so through an incredibly difficult admission test, since he didn't have any magic powers but made up for it by being a grade-skipping genius. "Good morning, Lady Clays," he replied with a somewhat gloomy voice. "Is anything the matter? Are you okay?" I asked, worried. "Yes. I am fine." So he said, yet he looked anything but. He didn't seem sick or anything, just very concerned about something. "You can talk to me if you want, you know?" "What's wrong?" I asked, and he looked up at me. But before he could come up with a response, he seemed to notice something behind me that worsened his dejected look even further. I followed his gaze and saw Maria and Cyrus, having fun chatting as they walked together. I see, his troubles must have to do with Maria, I instantly realized thanks to my renowned powers of deduction. "Did anything happen between you and Maria?" I asked him, and his face went from gloomy to outright sad. "Not at all. That is the issue." I had no idea what he meant, so I kept listening. "She is such a charming girl. Everyone loves her," Dewey elaborated. "She sure is. I heard that she was recently summoned by the prince," he continued. "Well, actually it was the king who summoned her, but that's a secret. And it dawned on me that she is completely out of my league," he murmured, staring down at the floor. "Poor Dewey. He's all out of confidence." "Ah, Dewey, don't say that. You're amazing yourself. You passed the ministry's admission test at your age. That test was hard even for smart adults, let alone 13-year-olds. As if that wasn't enough, Dewey worked in the Magic Powers Department, where all the most skilled ministry employees gathered. Despite being so young, everyone already had huge expectations for this child prodigy. That was probably just luck. I do not have any magic powers, and the family I come from is not good enough to give me the right to long for Maria. Any comparison with her would put me to shame." Looking at his crush as she walked together with their superior, he concluded, "I wish I could be as wonderful a man as Sir Lanchester is. Unlike me, he is fit to walk beside her." "That's not true," I objected, leaving Dewey surprised. "Cyrus may be hiding it well, but he can barely even speak to girls outside of work. Maria is smiling, but just look at how stiff his face looks. He's probably talking to her about martial arts. Actually, he's definitely talking about that. No way could he talk about anything else with her." Cyrus was too shy to even sit in the same carriage as Maria or go out for groceries with her, but since she had asked him to teach her self-defense, he had found a topic that he could manage a conversation about. Dewey was probably closer to her than Cyrus was, since at least he could easily talk to her during meals at the cafeteria. I wished I could explain that to my very concerned friend, but I had promised to keep Cyrus's real personality secret. I knew that he was terribly scared of girls from our time together in the fields, but most people, including Dewey, mistook him for an extremely cool, fearless guy. "You're just as wonderful as he is," I finally managed to tell him. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have mentioned that to you," he replied. "I got this totally wrong. Unfortunately, since we worked in different departments, I had to part ways with Dewey before I could comfort him in any way." Still worried about my friend, I entered the magical tool laboratory. "Good morning," I told Sora, who was already cleaning the office, before joining him in that activity. I considered asking Sora for advice regarding Dewey's troubles, but then I remembered just how grown up his response was when I last asked him about romance. He probably wouldn't be able to sympathize with the childishly complex romantic struggles of a 13-year-old. "What's with that look of pity you got on your face?" he asked me, noticing the way I was looking at him. "You're thinking something rude about me, aren't you?" "Nope, not at all," I replied to my extremely sharp colleague. "Yeah, sure. I bet you are. Just spit it out. It's nothing rude. I was just thinking that you wouldn't understand the delicate romantic issues of a person's first love. That's definitely rude. You can't just go and decide what I can and can't understand. So you do understand them." I gasped, and he started rubbing his knuckles against my head like he always did. Hey. Stop it. You're going to mess my hair up," I cried, trying to resist, but to no avail. "Ha. He's just trying to distract me because he doesn't understand the first thing about that," I thought, but rather than voicing my doubts, I decided to rub my knuckles against his head too. Once Sora's hair was slightly ruffled and mine completely ruffled, our little fight was interrupted by the arrival of our colleagues. I'd gotten no useful advice from that interaction, but I knew just the guy to go to for help. While we were heading to the room where he would teach me about dark magic, I told Raphael about Dewey's problem. "And so he's lost all confidence. I want to help him, but I don't know what to do," I concluded. Raphael had a thing for understanding people's feelings, as he had proven with his wonderful advice on how to deal with a kid whom he had never even met before. I'd always admired him as a talented schoolmate and colleague, but now I looked up to him as a wise teacher that I could always rely on. I was sure that he could help me out with the Dewey situation. "I believe that you," he started after thinking for a while. "Yes. What should I do?" "Well, nothing." "Hey!" I cried, surprised by this completely unexpected suggestion. I had figured that Raphael would give me some practical advice on what to say or do for Dewey. But he's so sad. I can't just let him be. I desperately explained, and Raphael smiled at me. "You should be there to listen to him when he wants to talk, yes, but you should probably limit yourself to that." "But why? You gave me those perfect lines when I had to deal with Liam." "That is because I felt that Liam wanted someone's help. And Dewey doesn't." "Yes. He probably doesn't want anyone to solve this issue for him. This is something that he has to deal with himself. With no help." "Exactly," he confirmed, nodding his head. "I have spoken with him on a few occasions, and I think that he has a self-esteem problem. That being, he underestimates himself because he doesn't have enough confidence. I don't know the details that well, but I've heard that he comes from a poor family. Maybe that is the reason why he thinks so harshly of himself." This sounded right. I knew about his family thanks to the note about the game and by having heard about it directly from Dewey. His folks were so poor that he had to work as a kid, while he was still going to school. That was probably why, despite being so smart, he never made a big deal out of it. I used to think that he was just being humble, but maybe that wasn't the case. Or maybe someone close to him kept pushing him down, Raphael muttered with the sad look of one who understood how that felt. "When you lack confidence, what the people around you do barely matters. You must make the change yourself." "So, I can't help him in any way." "That's not entirely true. You can be there for him and listen to his troubles. And if he does end up asking for your help, then of course you can lend it to him," he replied with a smile. Raphael's words hit me like a truck. Of course. I was always thinking I should do this or do that, but I can just hear him out. Sometimes, when I'm feeling down, I also just want someone to listen to me. Also, remember that Dewey is a man, with all the pride that comes with that. He probably doesn't want a woman to worry for him, Raphael explained with a slightly mocking grin. He, Raphael, I knew I could count on you, and I'm glad I did. Thank you. I smiled at my wise teacher. Oh, don't mention it. And now, let's go, he replied, hurrying toward the room where we had our dark magic classes. Hey, that reaction was a bit weird. Is it me or is he blushing? Strange. Guess he's back to normal now though. Once we reached our classroom, we started with the follow-up to last time's lesson, Shaping Darkness. 2 days before I'd done that without any issue, but this time, for some reason, I could only make the darkness wobble around a bit without taking on any precise shape. Don't worry, you're just starting out, Raphael comforted me with his usual smile. I do worry about whether I'll get this right in the 6 or so months I've got left. After I was done teaching Katarina her dark magic lesson, I told her to go back to the department office before me, and remained in the room, sitting down by myself. I would normally never do something like that, but my throbbing heart needed some respite. These lessons of ours, I felt, had brought me and Katarina closer together, but the distance between us had become much shorter and had closed so much faster since I had advised her about that one runaway orphan. It seemed that she was now willing to open up her heart to me. Of course, I was happy to see her rely on me, but I knew of Katarina's bad habit of completely lowering her guard when it came to people that she trusted. That presented a problem. We spent time together, alone, literally only divided by an arm's length, and there she was flattering me, looking at me with twinkling eyes. I tried to hide just how much this affected me, but after she left, I always found my heart racing. For years, that dreadful woman's words of spite for Raphael had poisoned my mind. You're such a lovely young man, serious, unlike that disgusting harlot's son. Now, however, I was finally free from that poison. Instead, Katarina's words gave me the strength to go forward. You're amazing, Raphael. I stood up from my chair, feeling as if I had all the energy I needed for the long day of work before me. In the afternoon, as usual, I was supposed to read the Covenant together with Maria. Shut into a small room with a dictionary in front of me, just staying awake was a feat in itself. As always, I wasn't making much progress either. I'd finally managed to read past the initial warnings, and I'd reached the part that taught how to summon darkness out of thin air, like I'd recently learned with Raphael. That's still so basic. After struggling not to fall asleep for quite a while, it was finally time for our break. On most days, I took this as a chance to stop struggling and just take a nap, but today I couldn't stop thinking of how Dewey was doing. In particular, I remembered what Raphael had said about having someone who was always pushing him down. I tried thinking back over all I knew about Dewey, but I realized that it wasn't much. He came from a poor family, studied by himself, went to school while working, and then managed to pass the ministry's admission test. That was pretty much it. It wasn't easy to talk to him, since we worked in different departments. That was also true for Cyrus, but at least we always met in the fields, where I'd already learned about how good he was with farming, how bad he was with girls, and so on. In other words, out of all the game's romanceable characters in the ministry, Dewey was the one I knew the least about. What kind of guy is he? I thought to myself, staring at nothing, until a beautiful blonde girl stepped into the aforementioned nothing. Oh, right. Maria probably knows a lot more about him than I do. They work in the same department and they even come from the same town. Hey, Maria, can you tell me a bit about Dewey? Dewey Percy? From my department? Yeah, that one. Is anything the matter? She asked, probably curious as to why I'd ask about him out of the blue. I ran into him earlier, and he kind of looked distressed, but I don't know why, I replied. I actually knew the reason why, but I definitely couldn't tell Maria. I see. He did make that same impression on me today. So she noticed too. I guess they spend a lot of time together while working, after all. I hope that he has not overworked himself, she said, sounding extremely worried. You mentioned that he tends to go overboard with work, didn't you? I asked. Right after joining the ministry, Maria, Dewey, and I, among others, were all sent on a mission together. It was then that Maria had commented on how much of a workaholic Dewey was. Yes. He had nobody that he could rely on in his family, so he has always been doing what he could by himself. I believe that this has become a habit for him. She must be so worried about him because she's the same. She's always trying to do things by herself without relying on anyone. By the way, you say that he had nobody that he could rely on, but what kind of family did he have? I knew that his family was very poor, but that was about it. Why would a kid even have to struggle to go to school? What happened to his parents? Maria seemed to think deeply about her answer. I imagined it was no easy topic to discuss. She looked straight at me, and I returned her gaze, silently telling her that I would keep everything she was going to tell me confidential. Understanding this, she nodded and started speaking. He has several siblings, but all of them have to work to support the family. And what about his parents? They do not work. Are they ill or something? I have heard that they are more than healthy, especially when they go out to drink and have fun. They make their children work so they can have fun. She didn't say that outright, but the look of pure disgust on her face must mean just that. And when did those siblings start working? How did they go to school? I asked. I knew that Dewey had barely managed to attend school, so depending on her answer, my opinion of his parents could potentially get much worse. I remember that some of them were made to work at home from before they were old enough to even speak properly. It seems that Dewey is the only one who was able to go to school. As it turned out, they were terrible parents. In my old world, child welfare would have probably taken all of those children away from them. Don't other people step in? I had been to Maria and Dewey's hometown once, and I remembered that, despite not being as advanced as the capital, it wasn't that run-down either. I assumed that the neighbors or somebody else would speak up against this kind of child abuse. Some have tried, but his parents are rather difficult people. Whenever they hear someone complaining, they respond by treating their children even worse. So eventually, everyone just stopped trying. Wow, Dewey had it even worse than I thought. I wonder, Maria spoke softly, if Dewey is upset because of something his parents told him. And no, I don't think that's it, I rushed to say, since I knew that his issue was thinking that he wasn't fit for Maria. I remembered what Raphael had told me about someone close to Dewey pushing him down. He was only guessing, but after hearing about those terrible parents, Raphael's guess started sounding pretty spot on. They are the kind of people who would send their children to work while they laze around. I can't even imagine what they could have told their son. Surely it's nothing good. You know, when you think about it this way, Dewey's making it into the ministry is even more impressive than I'd realized. The ministry's admission test, which was already extremely difficult, could only have been made worse by the fact that he had to work while attending school. I couldn't even begin to understand how much effort he had put into it. I agree. He really is, Maria concurred, and as she did so, her worried expression changed into a smile. Listen, Maria, I think that you should look over Dewey from afar like you always do, but without helping him out unless he asks you to. You know, he's got his pride as a man, right? So maybe it's awkward for him when a girl helps him out, I told my friend, basically parroting what Raphael had told me just earlier. Pride as a man? I see. I will follow your suggestion, she assented with a giggle. I know. He's only 13, and he looks even younger. Not really what you think of when you say the word man. I also kind of giggled when Raphael said that. But boys of that age must be going through a lot. I remember that Keith was moody all the time back then, and father explained that I should just let him be. Raphael's advice makes even more sense when I think about it that way. After we agreed that the best course of action in regard to Dewey would be taking no action, we went back to reading our respective covenants. Whew, I'm done for today. I even managed to stay awake the whole time, albeit barely, I announced once our workday was over. I have recently seen a tea for sale that purportedly helps with excessive sleepiness, Maria declared. Oh, I need that. Where do they sell it? In a shop near the center of the capital, Maria explained where the shop was supposed to be located. I kind of get it, but I'm not confident I could get there. Oh. I know. Would you go shopping there with me? I asked her. That way, I would be sure to find it and I would also be able to shop with my friend. Of course, I would love to, she replied, and we decided that we would go there as soon as our days off coincided, which, thankfully, was going to be very soon. I parted ways with Maria, already looking forward to going out with her in a few days, and went back to the magical tool laboratory to get my stuff. When I walked into the office, I found my colleagues inside having a tea break. Oh, if it isn't Lady Katarina. Would you care for some tea? The incredibly muscular Laura, in her perfect makeup and gothic Lolita outfit, asked me. She could look kind of flashy, but, as I knew from going on a mission with her shortly after joining the ministry, Laura, officially Guy Henderson, was a very kind and talented individual. Sometimes we had lunch together, and she would teach me about cosmetics and whatnot. I checked the time, and, since it wasn't that late yet, I accepted her offer. Thank you. With pleasure. I sat down beside her. She even poured my tea for me, sweet, kind Laura. Along with her were the perpetually lost Nathan Hart, the incurable narcissist Nix Cornish, and the ventriloquism-loving Lisa Norman. Not a normal person to be seen. Not like there's any normal person in this whole department anyway. Oh, I'm so glad that we've been able to finish work on time lately. Why, yes, being able to sleep properly has made my skin shine even brighter than usual. Having Miss Larna in the office makes a lot of difference. It sure does. This is probably the first time she has ever been this present since she became department head. I listened in surprise to my chatting colleagues. Sora and I usually went home as soon as the workday was over, mainly because we were still newcomers, but apparently all the more experienced people had to stay overtime. Was it always that busy around here? I asked. Ha! Nix exclaimed, suddenly jumping out of his seat. It sure was. So much so that we would often have to work through the night, leaving me sleepless and my skin depleted of its natural brilliance. It was such a tragedy. He was pretending to sigh and cry, and I couldn't do anything but stare, waiting for him to finish. He makes it sound made up, but that's how it really was, Laura added, tiredly resting her chin on one hand. Lisa, or rather the plushie that she used to interact with the world, nodded in agreement. That must have been tough, especially if you say Miss Larna has never been this present before, I mused. Yes, but she is still a good superior, mind you. She never complains about how I dress, for example, Laura replied. And she also understands the beauty of my wonderful outfits, Nix added, puffing up his chest as he flaunted his sparkling clothes. They wouldn't know how to deal with a guy this weird in the other departments, Lisa's plushie, commented. Oh, Lisa. Need I remind you that I was accepted into the magical ministry because of my incredible magical skills? I thought you got accepted because a relative of yours put in a good word for you. Hey. As if you're one to speak. You didn't take the admission test either. You got in on a recommendation. Yes, a recommendation I got because of my good grades and magical prowess. Unlike someone. What are you trying to say? Back at the academy you always were one of the runners-up for worst performing student, weren't you? I just wasn't trying hard enough back then. Seeing Lisa and Nix bicker like that, I thought it was a good opportunity to ask them about something that had been on my mind for a while. Have you two known each other for long? Yes, very long indeed, Nix replied. Yes, unfortunately, Lisa answered at almost the same time. These two different replies made them start bickering again, and Laura had to step in to provide me with an explanation, they're the same age, you see, and they're childhood friends. They even attended the academy together. The way they were at each other's throats really made it feel like they'd been friends for a very long time. They mentioned they were both recommended to enter the ministry. Was it the same for you too? I asked Laura. Some people joined through the same admission test that Dewey had taken, and on top of their test score, they needed someone to vouch for them. However, particularly promising academy students were often recruited on a recommendation basis and could skip the test. Since I knew that Laura had quite strong magic powers, I assumed that the latter was the case for her too. Oh, not at all. I just took the standard admission test, she unexpectedly replied. Everything about her seemed to imply that she came from a noble family and could have taken the easy way in, so learning the truth shocked me. Hee. I'm not only beautiful, but smart too, she declared, noticing my surprise. I thought it was best not to pry any further, in case that was an unpleasant topic for her. Nathan got in the same way too, she continued. Yes, because I don't have any magic powers, Nathan explained. But he's incredible, you know? He passed that test studying all by himself. Just like Dewey. That's amazing. That's very difficult to do, isn't it? I asked. I would say so, he replied after thinking for a while, as the test isn't only about magic, but a variety of other fields of study as well. However, even though I never formally attended any school, I had several highly skilled tutors teaching me. Saying that I studied by myself would be a bit disingenuous. Several tutors? How so? My family is part of a group of traveling merchants. When I was young, the other merchants shared their vast knowledge with me. I see. A group of traveling merchants sounds really cool though. Why did you end up leaving them? I asked him, and Nathan fell silent. He was smart, Laura replied for him as she laughed, but he'd always get lost while they were traveling, so they kicked him out. They didn't kick me out. They just, very strongly suggested that I find a job that doesn't involve any traveling, he corrected her. I'd seen him get lost just walking inside the ministry, so being part of a group of traveling merchants must have been very hard for the rest of the group, that is. That being said, even with so many talented teachers, passing that test was no small feat. Doing so with no outside help would require an enormous amount of effort, Nathan said, possibly trying to swerve the discussion away from that embarrassing story. An enormous amount of effort. The environment that Dewey was in made it difficult to study at all, let alone pass a test that even adults have trouble with. It must have been so hard for him. Even harder than I thought before. After listening to the argument between Nix and Lisa for a while longer, I left the department and headed toward the gate by myself for once, since Sora wasn't working in the office that day. On my way there, I saw Maria and Dewey walking together. The overly respectful distance that they kept between each other made me kind of sad, but, more than that, I felt that I couldn't look at Dewey the same way I used to before. It was as if I could see the weight of all that he'd been through lying on his shoulders. Sprinting for a while would have been enough to reach them, but I decided to leave them alone and rode on my carriage home. Back at the Clay's mansion, I found Keith busy being so obnoxiously sexy that all the maids were having trouble focusing on their work. Thanks to all the other stuff going through my head and the resistance I had built up from years of living with him, I was able to resist his charm. For the sake of the maids around me, I tried to ruffle up his hair and his clothes in an attempt to make him less attractive, but unfortunately this seemed to have the opposite effect. I need to remember to ask the escort maids how they're able to cope with having Nicole in the house. Keith changed so suddenly though, and Jedward too. They got 100 times more charming just because I told them that I would think about my feelings once I was done surviving Doom, but at this rate, I'm scared I won't be able to survive them. I'm probably going to go crazy from the sexiness to the point I won't be able to think about anything at all. I thought to myself right before falling asleep. The next day, I went to the ministry and did my usual work. It felt like I was running into Dewey more often now that I was worrying about him, but even though he still looked kind of depressed, I followed Raphael's advice and refrained from doing anything about it. Maria, who was spending the afternoon with me deciphering her covenant, seemed to be worrying and waiting just like me. We actually spent a few days like this, until it was finally time for us to go shopping together. I prepared myself and rode on the carriage to the ministry dormitories, where Maria was already outside waiting for me, with Dewey by her side. "Good morning, Maria." "And Dewey too." "Good morning, Lady Katarina," they both replied. "I will be on my way then," Dewey then declared, ready to go back inside. "Wait, Dewey. Are you working today?" I quickly asked him. "No, today is my day off." "Do you have any plans?" "Nothing in particular. I was thinking of going to the library." He explained that he just so happened to pass by here and stopped when he saw Maria. "Hey, this looks like a good opportunity. I can't just let him leave like that." I had decided I'd do as Raphael had told me and just be there for Dewey when he wanted to talk with somebody, but we never had enough chances to talk to begin with. "Say, Dewey, why don't you come to the city with us?" I suggested. I took a quick glance at Maria, just to be sure that she was okay with this, and she immediately started nodding her head while looking at me with sparkling eyes. She obviously had no problem with it. However, Dewey shook his head. "I wouldn't want to be a nuisance while you two are trying to enjoy yourselves." The way he thought that his presence would be a nuisance made me think that Raphael's theory about Dewey's lack of self-confidence was spot on. He looked pretty sad, and I knew that I couldn't give up so easily. "Don't be silly. We'd have even more fun if you came with us. Am I right, Maria?" "Yes," she agreed, nodding her head once again. "Come with us, Dewey." Our friend started looking as if he couldn't decide what to do. I bet it's different now that the girl he loves so much invited him too. Convincing him won't be so hard. "Everyone seems to be here today." "Hey," a familiar voice suddenly interjected. "Miss Larna?" I asked. "Good morning, Miss Katarina," the owner of the voice replied, waving her hand at me. The reason I couldn't be so sure of who she was at first was that she looked nothing like she did at work. She wasn't wearing her uniform and had either dyed her hair or was wearing a wig. She was a master of disguise, and while she always looked the same in the office, probably just another disguise too outside of it, she changed her appearance so much that you couldn't even recognize her. Today's disguise was probably in the middle of these two extremes. "Why are you here?" I asked, remembering how I'd heard that she didn't live in the dormitories as she had a house, or rather a mansion, since she was probably a noble of her own. "See, I so much as show my face in this place on a day off and they immediately have me running errands," she replied, taking out a piece of paper from her pocket. "Dewey Percy, there's a letter for you here. It's from your family. It was delivered to the department by mistake, and I've been asked to bring it back to you." Dewey, just like Maria, lived in the ministry's dormitories. Receiving a letter from one's family sounded like something perfectly normal, but his reaction seemed to imply otherwise. "What?" he shrieked with a look of horror on his face. "I guess reacting like this makes sense, considering what Maria told me about his family. I came to deliver it immediately because it said urgent on it. If there's any problem that needs to be taken care of, just let me know and I'll try to help out," Larna said, handing him the letter. She could sometimes forget about everything because of her obsessive love for magic, but, in general, Larna was a good, caring superior. After hearing her say something like that, putting the letter away and reading it later wasn't really an option. After hesitating for a bit, Dewey opened the envelope and started reading the letter. As he went through it, the expression on his face turned darker and darker. Maria and I, concerned for him, just looked on and waited for him to say something. Larna, however, made sure we wouldn't have to wait too long. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" she asked. The letter says that one of my younger sisters is terribly ill, and that I should go back home as soon as possible," he nervously explained. That's terrible. Dewey. My carriage is parked nearby, so let's get aboard and go to your home in that. I suggested. But I will come too. Let's hurry, Dewey, Maria joined in, grabbing his arm. He still looked befuddled, but he nodded at her. And so, my shopping trip with Maria was cancelled and it was decided that we would go to Dewey's house instead. Excuse me, I spoke up once we were on the carriage, not that it's a problem or anything, but, why are you coming with us, Miss Larna? I'm curious about Maria and Dewey's hometown, she nonchalantly replied. It's like curiosity dictates anything she ever does. Oh well, it's not like I have any reason to stop her from coming. Sarah, you are free to spend today however you like, my master told me. It was not the first time that he had granted me that freedom on a whim. When it happened, I would usually go back to my room and wait for the day to pass by without doing anything, as I didn't know what to do with my free time. However, today I felt restless. That had actually been the case for a while now. Having something to do would have distracted me, but sitting by myself with nothing to do kept me thinking. I thought back to Katarina Clays, and how she had hugged that boy and told him to reach out his hand. That memory deeply agitated me. I had heard that she was going to be in town for leisure on this day. That woman was the whole reason behind the turmoil I felt in my heart, and I wanted to do something about it, something about her. I had been told not to kill her, but anything short of that would have probably been fine. Compelled by an unfamiliar emotion, I left my room. The people around town will probably know where she's gone. I just need to use dark magic to make them tell me. For the first time, I had acted out of my own free will. Riding along the familiar road to Maria's town was doing nothing to make the atmosphere inside the carriage less gloomy. Dewey was still clenching the letter in his hands, reading it over and over again. I'd heard that he and his siblings were very supportive of each other, and something like "come back as soon as possible" meant that his sister's situation was quite scary. I could imagine how anxious he was, and I promised myself to introduce him to a good doctor. The carriage, which wasn't the fancy Clays family one but an unassuming one I'd had prepared so we could go shopping, took us all the way to Dewey's house. His was even further away from the town's center than Maria's house was. My house is not a place fit for people of your class, Dewey told me and Larna as soon as we were there, so you can wait outside if you want. That doesn't matter at all. I'm also worried, so I'd like to go in if you don't mind, I replied, and he agreed to let us in. Yeah, doesn't matter to me either, Larna concurred, casually coming after us. Once we got out of the carriage, I understood why Dewey had said that. Rather than a house, it was a shack, and a flimsy one at that. It looked like a gust of wind would have been enough to take it apart. That was worse than I had expected, but I had seen people living in buildings like those when visiting other poorer towns, so I didn't have any problem going inside one. The confusing part was how such a rundown house was located in this relatively wealthy town not so far from the capital. When we got closer, the door opened and a young man, probably slightly younger than I was, peered out from behind it. His face was somewhat similar to Dewey's, who confirmed my suspicions by whispering, "He's my brother." The young man, even though he couldn't possibly have heard a whisper that quiet, noticed Dewey, and seemed to be extremely surprised by his presence. "What are you doing here?" Dewey's brother yelled, making it clear enough that he wasn't welcome there. Even though I knew his parents were terrible people, I had been under the assumption that the siblings were on good terms with each other. "I received a letter. That is why I'm here," Dewey, who looked hurt by his brother's reaction, answered laconically. "What letter?" "Here." He handed the letter to his brother, who gave him a spiteful glance. "Are you trying to make fun of me? You know I can't read." "Oh. Right. I'm sorry," he replied sadly. Maria had told me that Dewey was the only one in his family who had managed to attend school, so it made sense that his siblings wouldn't be able to read and write. In a country such as Sorsey, where education was free and most of the population was literate as a result, lacking that skill sounded like a disgrace. So? What's it say? Dewey's brother asked without changing his unwelcoming facial expression one bit. Well, it says that Belle is very ill, and that I should come back immediately. Hey? What are you talking about? Belle's fine. What? The two Percy brothers were looking at each other in confusion when an inappropriately happy voice rang from inside the house. Oh, is that Dewey? You came. I've been waiting for you, my boy. The voice belonged to a huge guy, who stumbled out of the door making his round belly flop up and down. Judging from his gait and from his red face, he was obviously drunk. Dad? Dewey murmured under his breath. That huge, drunk guy is his dad. No way. He doesn't look anything like him. Or, maybe he would if he lost a lot of weight? When thinking about the father of such a prim and proper boy as Dewey, I certainly wouldn't have imagined such a dirty, untidy man. What do you mean you were waiting for him? Did you send that letter to him? Dewey's brother asked his father. His voice was clearly angry, but his father didn't seem to notice. Oh, yeah, I sure did. My tab at the pub's got so long they won't give me one drop of booze. That's why I called my boy prodigy back home. He's at least got enough saved up to buy his old dad some liquor, ain't that right? And I knew he'd come back running if I told him that Belle was ill or something like that. He's a sweet one, my Dewey boy, the drunken dad replied, walking toward his young son and giving him a couple of pats on the back, strong enough to make him sway. So, you see, I need some coin. You send me some every month from that nice salary of yours, don't you? But I need more. Not that much, don't you worry. There was silence. The money I send is not meant for you. It's for my siblings, Dewey finally replied, glaring hatefully at the man. Dewey's brother looked as surprised as I was to learn that he had been sending money back home from his ministry salary. That unforgivable old man was probably taking all of it for himself, leaving none to those it was actually meant for. Once again, the man was left unfazed by his son's anger. What ya talking about? My children's stuff is my stuff. That's not the problem. The problem's that it's not enough. You should start sending a bit more from N. Before the man could finish his sentence, Dewey's brother had grabbed him by the arm, dragging him away. Watch it, Ronnie. Can't you see I'm having an important discussion with your little brother? Ronnie, as I now knew he was called, didn't reply to his father's complaints. He simply shoved him back into the house and slammed the door closed, standing in front of it so that he couldn't come back outside. What's the big idea? You're gonna treat your own father like this, the old man shouted from inside the house while banging on the door. This time it was Ronnie's turn to ignore his father's anger. It's just as you heard. Belle is fine. Now leave, he coldly said to his younger brother. But, Dewey, shook by receiving this cold treatment, replied as he looked at the door behind which his father was still shouting, but Ronnie left him no time to say more. You left this home, so whatever happens here is none of your business. Now get out of my sight and don't you ever come back again. Dewey flinched at his brother's sudden yelling, then he gave up and started walking back to the carriage. I am very sorry that you had to see this. I have nothing else to do here, so, we can go back now, he told us. I started objecting, but Lorna put a hand on my shoulder and shook her head. Catching her drift, I nodded and silently followed Dewey. We kept walking like that, without talking, until we reached the carriage. Once we did, Dewey turned around and said, I've just remembered something that I must do. Please go back without me. I will ride a public carriage later on. He started running in a direction different than the one we had come from, and before we knew it, he had already gotten quite far. I cannot let him go by himself like that, Maria declared. She was right. He looked like he could burst into tears at any moment. We couldn't just leave him alone and go back by ourselves. Got it. We have other things to do, so we can't go with you, but you go and make sure that nothing bad happens to Dewey, all right. Lorna replied. After nodding in agreement, Maria quickly ran after Dewey, leaving me and Lorna alone in the carriage. Excuse me. What other things do we have to do? I asked her. Oh, I just thought this might be the perfect opportunity to introduce ourselves to the Percy family, she replied with a creepy grin. It was painfully clear from her face that whatever she was planning wasn't a simple friendly introduction. Still, after seeing the trouble that Dewey was going through and the way his father just laughed it all off, I found myself thinking that letting Lorna loose on the guy wouldn't be so bad. I'm really mad at him right now. Okay. Off we go, she said, heading toward Dewey's house, and I followed her. As we got closer, we heard angry screams coming from inside the shack. We started running, and my fears were confirmed as soon as we were close enough to see what was going on. The screams were coming from Dewey's father, who was beating up Dewey's brother. He pushed his son down to the ground with that huge body of his and kept kicking poor Ronnie. Stop! I shouted, making the man stop for a moment. Immediately after, Lorna used her wind magic to blow him away and against the shack's wall. The man only let out a brief groan before passing out. She's not kidding around. Lorna went to check on the dad, so I rushed to see how Ronnie, who was still on the ground, was doing. I noticed some kids, probably Dewey's younger siblings, standing to the side with tears in their eyes. I crouched down near Ronnie and saw that his face was swollen from the beating. What happened to the old man? He asked me. If he's asking that, he hasn't seen Lorna using her magic. Good. Pretty much all the people that can use magic are nobles, and they aren't supposed to use it willy-nilly anyway. Of course, this called for it, but it's even better if he didn't notice at all. There was a sudden gust of wind, and he stumbled, slammed against the wall, and passed out, I explained. Oh, Ronnie replied without questioning my story in the slightest. Maybe it was easy to believe because his dad was constantly drunkenly crashing into things. Blood started flowing out of Ronnie's mouth, probably from a cut he had gotten while he was being beaten. Are you okay? Here, use this. I offered him my handkerchief, but he took one look at it and shook his head. I'm good. Wouldn't want to get it dirty. Isn't that the point of handkerchiefs? I asked, taken aback, and he gave me a sad look in return. That's too fine of a luxury for people like me. This is what I get to do, he said, wiping off his mouth with his already dirty sleeve. People like me, he sounds just like Dewey. Maybe it's growing up in this environment that makes them think those things. Well-off people like you shouldn't hang around a place like this. And also, please tell Dewey to stop sending that money, he continued before I could reply. After taking a look at his still unconscious father, he addressed his younger siblings, telling them, go back to hiding in case he wakes up and gets violent again. I'm off to work now. He tried to wipe off some of the mud that had gotten on his clothes and then started walking off, still bleeding, dirty, and even limping as if he had just hurt his leg. You're hurt. You need care. I cried, but he ignored me and kept walking. I understood that going after him would be pointless, and trying to fix someone's wounds while he was resisting would have been too difficult. As I was thinking about what to do, I heard a groan from behind. His father had woken up. Sheesh. What was that? He said, rubbing his head with his hand and trying to stand up. Oh, so the sluggard at last woke up. Lorna stood close by. The man replied with an affirmative grunt. He was probably still drunk, and his face was as red as ever, but seeing a man that big with his eyes full of anger was a scary sight. What made it worse was that not only was he big, but he also had no qualms about beating his own son until he started bleeding. You could tell that he ate more than enough from his round belly and healthy-looking skin, and the stench of alcohol left no doubts about the drinking either. His kids, on the other hand, all looked pale and overly thin, starting with Ronnie. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the rage building up inside of me. Unable to control myself, I scowled at the man, angrily addressing him. How can you do something like this? Violence toward children is unforgivable. Hey? What's your deal? They're my children and I do what I want with them. Get out of my face, he told me before starting to yell, Kids! Where are you? Can't you see your father is hurt? Come and fix me up. And bring some money. I need to buy my booze. The children seemed to have hidden themselves just as Ronnie had told them, and they were nowhere to be seen. Realizing that his yelling wasn't going to do him any good, the man clicked his tongue in annoyance and slammed his fist against the wall of his house. I told you to come out, you brats. If you don't show up right now, you're gonna get double the beating. I heard a muffled crying voice come from a tree near the house. A girl who looked like she was around 10 years old came out from behind it, carefully trying to protect another child who looked much younger still. The look of surrender on her face was simply devastating. What took you so long? When your father calls you, you gotta hurry up, the man blustered, raising his hand and getting ready to lower it forcefully into the girl's face. I was so shocked that I couldn't even react, but his arm halted on the way down, blocked by a gust of wind. Stop it, Larna coldly ordered the man. The fear I felt toward the man was nothing compared to the aura of enraged contempt that was emanating from Larna right now. This was probably the first time that I'd ever seen her get mad. Let me tell you something, scum, she continued, face completely expressionless. Kids are not tools. They're people, and they're not yours to use as you please. Once she was done reprimanding the drunkard, Larna sent another gust of wind toward him, flinging him face first to the ground. He let out a groan and stopped moving. The children were observing the scene with their eyes wide and their mouths shut. That also went for me, of course. I'd never seen Larna use her magic on someone to that extent, not even when fighting thugs. I didn't know what had caused her to snap like she had, but the drunkard wasn't going to get up for a very long while. Is it okay to use magic like this? I asked her as soon as I recovered from the shock. He was going to beat a child, sure, but he was still just a civilian, so this seemed like overkill. Larna, whose rage had now subsided, thought about it for a while. Well, I need to make sure that what happened here stays here. Don't worry about that guy, he'll be unconscious for the whole day at the very least. Be right back, she promised before quickly disappearing. What am I supposed to do now? At least I don't have to worry about that man, but... Are you okay? I asked the girl who was still standing as if to shield her younger sibling. Her little shoulders twitched in surprise before she feebly told me, yes. The fear on her face made me sad. These kids were probably subjected to violence like that on a daily basis. Don't worry. That woman who just ran off is going to take care of things, I tried to comfort her, smiling warmly, knowing that Larna would never leave these kids to themselves. She was definitely going to do something about it, and if she didn't, I would. The girl's terrified frown mellowed out a little bit. She seemed to ponder for a while before nervously asking me a question. Are you friends of my brother Dewey? Oh, so she really is Dewey's sister. She does kind of look like him too. Yes. We're friends and also work colleagues. Were you here when we all came here together earlier? I was looking from inside the house. I see. You should have come out though. I bet Dewey would have loved to see you. He still hasn't come back, by the way. Maybe I should go and tell him to come here, I suggested, but the girl shook her head. No. Ronnie's gonna get mad at us. Ronnie, is your brother, right? The one who was being beaten before. Why would he get mad at you? I asked, surprised. He said that Dewey is different from us, she explained with a sad face, so we can't meet him or talk to him anymore. So not only did he tell Dewey not to come back, but he's telling his other siblings to avoid him as well. Forget about Ronnie for a second. What about you? Would you like to see Dewey? I asked, trying my very best to sound gentle and reassuring. I want to see him. I want to talk to him. He's so kind and he knows so many interesting things. I love my brother, she exclaimed, and as she did so, tears started welling up in her eyes. I reached out my hand and patted her head. This girl was probably just doing as Ronnie had told her, and she couldn't talk to anybody about how she really felt. Maybe she opened up with me because I told her I was a friend of Dewey's. The girl started sobbing, shaking as she did so, and I softly hugged her. She seemed surprised at first, but then she let herself go and rested her little body against mine as she kept wailing. While I waited for the poor girl to calm down, I thought about Ronnie and Dewey. The former said that he didn't want anything to do with the latter, but looking at how he actually interacted with him gave a somewhat different impression. Thank you, the girl seemed a little embarrassed once her tears had stopped. Don't worry. I patted her head once more. It was then that I noticed several pairs of envious eyes looking in my direction. More of Dewey's siblings, all even younger than the girl I had just spoken to, had come out from hiding and were now staring at me. Do you all want me to pat your head? I asked, and they all nodded. Dewey always did that for us, but Ronnie never does, so, the girl shyly explained. Well, then it's head pat bonanza time. I announced, stroking all of the children's hair in turn, until they were all smiling. Hey, I told the girl after I was done, I guess I want to have a proper talk with Ronnie. Can you tell me where he works? A proper talk with him? Yes. About Dewey. But he doesn't, she started saying, leaving her sentence unfinished. He doesn't like Dewey, is what she probably wanted to say. I have to talk to him to be sure, I replied, trying to put some confidence into my voice. You could never guess other people's feelings, no matter how close they were to you. The only way to know the truth was to ask them directly. The girl, persuaded, told me where her older brother worked. Leaving the children's fate in Lorna's capable hands, I headed toward Ronnie's workplace. Chapter 4, Divided Siblings. Dewey Percy, was raised by two people who made as many children as they could and then had them earn money so that they themselves would not need to work. Our house was decrepit, our clothes were worn out, and our stomachs were constantly empty. My first memories are those of working from home as a child. Whenever I made a mistake, my parents would insult and beat me for how useless I was. Some of my older brothers and sisters had run away without a word, probably fed up with that horrible home situation. Because of our parents, they had never learned how to read and write, and I wondered how they were faring on their own in this mostly literate country. However, I never heard anything from them. However, Ronnie, one of my brothers, despite being 5 years older than me, never left home. He remained there, bravely withstanding the dreadfulness of it all so that he could take care of his siblings. He always sounded grouchy, but he actually cared a lot for us, and he even took food out of his meals so that we could eat more. I looked up to him, and at the same time I wanted to be of some help myself. Of course, I didn't want to grow up into someone like my parents, but neither did I want to turn out to be as helpless as my older siblings whose only option had been running away. I wanted to change this horrible situation, both for me and for all my other siblings. In order to escape from poverty, I needed a good job, which in turn clearly required me to study a lot. I bartered with my siblings, promising that I would keep working just the same, and convinced them to let me go to school. During the day, I would attend school, where my classmates would make fun of me for my ragged clothes and old, battered textbook. During the night, I would stay up late to work and study even more, as much as I could. My efforts paid off, and I was able to skip grades and quickly pass what people called the most difficult admission test in the kingdom, the one that allowed me to work at the magical ministry. When I received the news of having passed, I felt the most happiness I ever had in my whole life. As I started working at the ministry, I moved to the workers' dormitory located on the premises, but I didn't forget about my family. As soon as I received my first salary, I sent almost all of it home, addressed to Ronnie, hoping that it would make my siblings' life easier, and I continued doing so every month. However, I eventually found out that Ronnie knew nothing of this money, which had all been intercepted by my father and used to finance his drinking. Or maybe part of it had gone into my mother's pocket, I do not know, but whatever the case, my siblings did not see a single cent of it. I was so busy getting used to my new job that I never found the time to visit. Well, truth be told, I did have days off, but I never used them to go back home. At the ministry I had a nice, clean room and tasty, warm meals. I didn't have to sleep on the cold floor bundled up in a bunch of rags, I didn't have to feel hunger, and most importantly, I didn't have to withstand my father's violence. I liked my new life, and I didn't want to go back just to be beaten by that drunken old man. In the end, I wasn't any different from my other siblings who'd run away. I was just thinking of myself, doing what was best for me with no regard for how my brothers and sisters were doing. I had abandoned them. It only made sense that Ronnie would tell me not to come back ever again. I had deserved that, and I had no right to feel sad for it. It's all my fault, I thought, holding back the tears as well as I could, when I felt someone put a hand on my shoulder and heard them call my name. I didn't need to turn around to tell who it was. I knew her voice well. She was Maria, the girl I loved. We had known each other since we were kids. Even though we lived in the same town, her situation was entirely different from mine. She was a magic user, and a wielder of light at that, which made her a rarity among commoners. At first, I remember feeling envy for her. However, listening to some of the rumor-loving people in town, I later found out that her life had not been quite as rosy as I had assumed. Her neighbors shunned her because of her powers, and, once at the academy, she was bullied by her noble classmates. I will never forget how she looked as she told me that she, too, once believed that she would have to fight all alone. However, despite the sadness, despite the pain of it all, she kept showing her kind smile. Even though the people there were anything but welcoming, she would still go back to her hometown on her days off. The strength that she showed was incredibly charming, but at the same time, it made me realize how I could never be like her. I had left the siblings I had wanted to help to their own fate, enjoying my new leisurely life. "Is everything all right, Dewey?" she gently asked me. I knew that she was lying. I knew that she had no reason to be there and only wanted to make sure I was okay, and I wanted to let myself go, accepting the pity that she was offering me. However, I wasn't worthy of her kindness. "Yes," I claimed, holding back the tears, "I was only a bit shocked. I am sorry. But my brother isn't to blame for what he said. I did abandon them. I am sorry you all had to witness that scene." I couldn't raise my head, let alone look Maria straight in the eye. As I said, "I will take a public carriage, so please go back without M." As I spoke, she took me in her arms, and I found myself inside a warm embrace. "Dewey, didn't I tell you that you don't have to face everything by yourself? You can rely on me," she said, stroking my back. "If you feel like crying, you shouldn't hold back. It will make you feel a bit better," she continued, and as if on command, tears started flowing out of my eyes. I was torn between the embarrassment of being seen crying and the warm comfort of the first gentle hug I could ever remember receiving. After crying for a while, I did feel a bit better, just as Maria had assured me. The more I calmed down, however, the more the awkwardness set in. In particular, my face was pushing against something very soft, which could only be. "No, don't think of that. I absolutely cannot think of that." But the more I tried to ignore that fact, the more I couldn't stop thinking about it. I am fine now. Please let me go," I insisted, now at my limit, and I was relieved from her embrace. I could only imagine how red my face was at that moment, but at least my heart felt a little lighter. "You do seem fine now," Maria told me with a smile. Yes. The girl I love comforted me while I was crying. Should I be happy about this? Should I just be embarrassed? So, since you are fine now, I have a proposal to make. Would you like to hear it? She stared at me with her clear blue eyes, making my face feel even hotter. Oh, of course. Won't you try to speak with your brother again? What? I yelped, completely taken by surprise. I had assumed that Maria, in her kindness, would suggest keeping my distance from someone who clearly wanted nothing to do with me. But he told me to never come back, because I abandoned my family. That is my point, she answered, gesturing with her index finger. You didn't abandon them. You were sending them money, and today you rushed here as soon as you read that letter. I never came back here before today though. It's barely been half a year since you left. You've just started your new job, so I'm sure you've been busy catching up with work even on your days off. That's true, yes, but I knew that, had I really wished to do it, I could have found the time to go back home. I chose not to. And most of all, you don't even know why your brother told you those things. That's just because I left him and all my other siblings. But you didn't. You can't be sure of how he feels, since you've never talked about it. You're just making assumptions. Someone, she said with a giggle, once told me this: you can't tell what people think, even if they're very close to you. Even if they're family. So you need to talk to them to be sure. I could tell that she was trying to do an impression of Katarina, and I couldn't help but giggle as well. However, she was right. Even when we lived together, Ronnie and I were both so busy that we never had much time to talk to each other. He was a grumpy guy, but he always looked out for his siblings. I didn't know why he'd say something like what he did. I must not run away, I thought, but I couldn't work up the courage to step forward either. I'll come with you, Maria then declared, and I immediately started walking back to the house, with the world's most wonderful woman by my side. I don't think I've made any wrong turns. I'd been following Dewey's sister's directions to Ronnie's workplace, but I didn't seem to be getting anywhere, and I started feeling anxious. There was a lot of greenery around me, but not a single soul that I could ask for information. I wasn't that bad at following directions, but I didn't have a compass built into my head either. Furthermore, I didn't really know this town except for the area around Maria's house. I'd never been near Ronnie's workplace before, and it honestly surprised me to even find a path in what was basically a forest. I thought it'd be close by, since he went there on foot. And his legs were injured too. It's sad to think he had to walk on this bumpy path full of rocks. I kept stumbling my way along the path until I saw Ronnie's back in the distance. So I didn't get lost. He was walking relatively slowly, probably because of his hurt leg, so catching up with him wasn't so hard. Ronnie. I called when I was close enough. Huh? Why are you here? I wanted to talk with you a bit more, I answered, and he looked at me suspiciously. Why should I talk with you? And I don't have time anyway. I'm going to work. But I heard from your sister that your job involves strenuous manual labor. How are you going to work, hurt like that? Tisk, always running her mouth, he grumbled, clearly displeased. I know, but I have to go and see if there's something I can do. If I don't make money, all the little ones are going to starve. So you're not even sure you'll be working at all? Then it'd be better to rest for the day, or your injuries won't get any better. If you need to report that you'll be taking the day off, I can deliver the message for you. Were you even listening to me? I'm paid by the day, and I need to work. I can't just take a day off like that. But if you go and hurt yourself even more, you won't be able to work at all. If you need money now, just ask Dewey. He'd be happy to know he can help. Dewey left us. He's not one of us anymore, he replied dryly, furrowing his brow. He was very worried about all of you while coming here, you know. That guy, he muttered, and I caught a glimpse of sadness in his eyes. You really care a lot about your brother, don't you? I asked Ronnie, whose face immediately turned sour. Hey! What are you talking about? I just said that he isn't one of us anymore. So you said, but doesn't that just mean that you don't want him to worry about the rest of you and enjoy his own life? I countered, feeling that this was the true meaning behind his harsh words. How'd you come up with that idea? By looking at you back there and here now. It's obvious that he's important to you, I declared, confidently staring at him. Ronnie started awkwardly scratching his head. Did Dewey say that? Nope. It's just what I think. Dewey thought that you hated him, and he was quite shocked because of that, I replied, and Ronnie gave me a look that was half relief and half sorrow. Let him think that then. Don't tell him about what you just told me. But why? He was really hurt when he heard those words coming from one of his beloved siblings. You should stop being so embarrassed about it and just tell him the truth. I'm not embarrassed about anything. You aren't. Hey, I thought that was the issue. Ronnie does look like the type who has trouble admitting his own feelings. Of course not. I just don't want to weigh him down. How so? You saw that scum we call father. While we're working our butts off, he steals all the money he can from us, gets drunk, and beats us. And our mother isn't much better either. That's why we have to live in that tiny shack that's gonna fall apart any day now. I've never been to school, so I can't hope to get any decent job, since I can't read. And all the others who left before Dewey were the same. He was the only one who made it. He got into the ministry. Having to care for a family like this is only gonna be a hassle for him. That's not. Before I could say true, Ronnie added one more thing. He's our pride, he said, looking calm and satisfied as he did so. He's always been smart, you know. He even learned how to read all on his own. When he told me he wanted to go to school, I knew that was the right thing for him. He'd go to school and then come back home to work. I know how hard he was working, trust me. And then, what do you know, he was even smarter than all the other kids there, and he got to skip grades. Oh, I was so happy when I heard of that. Then he got recommended by the school to take the ministry's exam, and he managed to pass it without a problem. I'm so proud. No, we're all so proud of having him as our brother. Ronnie's recounting of his brother's achievements was a happy and loving one. He clearly wasn't lying about being proud of Dewey. That's why I don't want to weigh him down. I want him to forget about scum like us and live his best life. He smiled sadly. Ronnie. Neither you nor your siblings are scum. I can't read and I can't do calculations with numbers. I'm a piece of useless scum, just like my father. Your father may be scum, but that doesn't apply to you. Of course, being literate and numerate is very useful, I will give you that, but those skills don't make you any worse or better of a person. If anything, I think very highly of you for the way you take care of your younger siblings. Despite the beating he had received, he was still determined to go to work to feed his family. Despite how this could make Dewey hate him, he wanted his little brother to be happy and free. That was the opposite of scum. Ronnie was staring at me, surprised. Perhaps, just like Raphael had theorized, both Dewey and Ronnie had been put down by someone for all their lives, their father, obviously, and ended up losing all of their self-confidence. Ronnie finally started talking, but someone's jarringly brisk voice interrupted him. There she is, the voice cried. I turned around and saw a cloaked woman running out of the woods toward us with a grin on her face. She was the very woman Liam and I had met near the orphanage. Larna had told me her name. Sarah. I wondered, and she seemed surprised. How do you know that name? She asked me. Someone told me, obviously. More importantly, what do you want? I fired back, wary of her, and she started laughing. I've come to bully you a little bit. Hey! I uttered, confused by that nonsensical answer. Why in the world would you do that? We barely even know each other, and this is the longest we've ever talked. Yes, she agreed after thinking about it for a while, that's true. But, you see, I've been feeling all weird up here because of you recently, she continued, placing a hand on her chest. For the first time, her expression didn't look fake. Her face right now reminded me of a child who could start crying any moment now. I felt kind of sorry for her, and I reached out my hand to her. And so, I'll bully you a bit to make up for it, she concluded, going back to her fake-looking grin as she raised and then quickly lowered her arms. When she did this, a huge black snake appeared out of nowhere. Wow! That looks even more realistic than the snakes I make, I thought, failing to understand the gravity of the situation. Watch out! Ronnie shouted, jumping in front of me to shield me from the snake, which hit him straight in the arm. HNG, he cried out in pain. Are you okay? I asked, trying to determine if he had been hurt. It's nothing. But don't just stand there like an idiot. And what's that girl's deal? He shouted, but, from the way he was holding his arm and the pained expression on his face, I could tell that it had definitely not been nothing. He jumped to protect me even though he barely knows me. He really is a good guy. I'm sorry. She's an acquaintance, of sorts, but I guess she hates me for some reason. Anyway, show me your arm. The spot where the snake had hit him had turned into a large black bruise. What's this now? He yelled, scared by the unnatural blotch on his skin. This isn't a normal bruise. It was dark magic, just as I suspected. That girl really knows her way around nasty spells, that's for sure. It's just like that time when she sealed us into that pitch-black space. I thought, the main difference being that, unlike the previous time, I had absolutely no idea what to do. Ah, I missed, Sarah muttered with a clearly fake frown. I feared that she was not going to leave it at that, however. Ronnie, that woman is dangerous. Please run away, I requested, but he shook his head. I'm not gonna leave you alone with someone dangerous, he replied. He wasn't just a good guy, but a brave one too. Thank you, but don't worry, I know how to defend myself. However, I can't hold out for that long, so I want you to go and tell that woman from the ministry who was with me earlier. Can you do that? If you can defend yourself, then you're probably better off without me, he conceded, looking at his wounded body. I'll go get that woman. As he started running back toward his home, I mentally added can make decisions and act quickly under stress to the list of good things about Ronnie. And have her look at your arm. I shouted as he escaped. He raised a hand to show that he'd understood. Good. And now, let's deal with her, I thought, turning around again to face Sarah. That's the second time you let someone else run away. You're really kind, aren't you? She spoke with a big smile and an unfittingly cold voice. She kept faking emotions so consistently that I couldn't tell what she was thinking at all. I had caught a glimpse of what seemed like a true reaction earlier, but it had only lasted a second. Say, why do you? And that's one more thing I hate about you, she interrupted me, swinging her arm once again. This time a black fog appeared, surrounding me. Everything around me went black and silent while the forest disappeared. This must be the same spell as before, no doubt about it. She's trying to trap me in the darkness. Last time it was so scary. I could have never made it out if Jedward and Keith hadn't been with me. But this time, it's different. I know how to get out. I visualized my skull wand, something that I was now well used to doing. I immediately felt its weight in my hand, and I clenched my fingers around it. Then, I waved the wand and visualized the darkness disappearing. A small dot of light popped up in front of me and started sucking up all the darkness surrounding it. Perfect. I did it. Soon I was out of the darkness and back into the forest, where Sarah was standing in front of me, looking terribly annoyed. So you really can fight my spell that easily? Well then, how about this? She taunted me, raising her arm for the third time. I knew that when she swung it back down it would make yet another dark spell come forth. Seeing how there wasn't that much distance between us, I rushed toward her and took her arm in my hand, stopping her from moving it. It was extremely thin, worryingly so. Listen. I want to talk this out with you, I pleaded. What are you saying? She asked in disbelief. The shock on her face, for once, looked genuine, which made me feel some relief. You seem to hate me for some reason, but I don't hate you. I want to know more about you, and I want to understand you. That's why I'd like to talk, I explained, still holding her arm. Her black eyes were as wide as those of a frightened child as she stared into mine. Look, I tried to continue, but she shook my hand off, lowered her hood over her face, and rushed into the forest as if she was trying to run away from me. She looks so defenseless. In the end, we still didn't manage to talk. I sighed to myself as Sarah disappeared between the trees. The girl they called Sarah, was aimlessly running through the forest. I didn't know where I was going, but I felt like I couldn't stop. If I did, that weird feeling in my chest would have taken over me. I'd always thought that Katarina Clays was a weird woman, but today I learned that she was even weirder than I'd ever imagined. She wants to talk with me? Know me? Understand me? I've never heard such strange things. What is wrong with her? The calm, peaceful way she'd looked at me when she said those things made them even worse. It was the first time that anyone had ever looked at me like that. Or was it? Maybe, long ago, someone else had looked at me that way. Before my father had stopped coming back home, my mother would give me that same calm look as she caressed my head. And when my father disappeared and my mother started ignoring me, that one boy would smile kindly at me. And even before that, my father. When I was taken by darkness, I had shut all those memories away to protect my heart. I lived without thinking, doing only what was ordered of me. Now, because of that cursed Clays woman, those memories had started resurfacing. It had been a very long day. Mom, I'm BA. I opened the door to find unfamiliar men inside my house. Scared by that sight, I looked around for my mother, before finally seeing her lying down on the floor beyond the strange intruders. One glance was enough to understand that she had no life left in her. I let out a scream that cannot be described with words, and I felt something explode inside of me. My whole body was taken over by a burst of heat. Hey, this kid's got magic. We're supposed to kill her too, but what should we do? Magic kids can come in handy. Let's take her back with us for now. And what about the body? Orders are to just make sure she doesn't get found. The men talked amongst themselves, but I couldn't really hear them. I kept screaming and hugging myself. I feel so hot. Mom. Mom. All of a sudden, I saw a dark shadow appear in front of me and felt a sharp pain in my stomach. The last things to go through my head as I lost consciousness were the kind mother I no longer had and the red-haired boy's kind face. Why am I remembering these things all of a sudden? Tears, something I thought I couldn't shed, were coming down from my eyes. My heart was throbbing. Throbbing with pain. Sadness. Longing. Grief. I ran even faster, overflowing with unfamiliar emotions. I kept plunging through the trees, scratching my face, hands, and feet against the branches, hoping that I would soon go back to normal. I was staring at the forest into which the woman had disappeared before realizing that I had more important things to do. Ronnie was still wounded, and I had sent him to call for Larna. I needed to tell him as soon as possible that he didn't have to rush anymore, or he'd be putting a lot of undue stress on his already weakened body. Even though I ran back as fast as I could, by the time I'd reached Ronnie I was almost back at his home. He noticed me and we just stood there for a while, staring at each other, gasping for air from all the running. That must have been a pretty funny sight. Ha! Ha. Thank you, for going back all this way, running, I gasped as soon as I had enough breath to do so. Huff. Huff. Don't worry. Ha. I wasn't even going all in, he replied, still wheezing. He ran all this way just because I asked him to, and he jumped in front of me without a second thought to save me from that snake. He's such a good guy. Oh, right. Ronnie, show me your arm. I commanded, and I took a closer look at it. The black bruise hadn't grown any bigger or darker, but it hadn't shrunk at all either. Does it hurt? I asked. It's not that big of a deal, really, he answered nonchalantly, but as I touched his bruise, he clearly writhed in pain. What kind of spell could this be? I'm sorry this happened to you because of me. I was the one who decided to jump in front of that snake, he told me, but ultimately it had all been for my sake. And to think the poor guy had been injured enough by his father already. I wondered whether Maria's light magic could fix his bruise. Light magic could cure wounds, but unfortunately it had failed to work that one time that Keith had been cursed or whatever. Maybe I can just pull it off, like with that curse thing. I thought, and I tried doing so, but to no avail. Okay, that didn't work. What about absorbing it like I did with the black fog? Might as well try. I put one hand behind my back, so that Ronnie wouldn't see it, and I made my skull wand appear. With a flick of the wrist, I visualized the bruise being sucked away into nothingness. And what's that? That black thing is, like, rising, Ronnie exclaimed, surprised by how the bruise was leaving his body and disappearing behind my back. What is going on? I did it. I'm great. Can you tell me what is going on? He repeated his question, probably understanding that I'd used magic on him. I couldn't really explain what I'd done, though, since dark magic was involved. I tried to come up with a good excuse, and failed. It's, a trade secret. Can't talk about the details. Oh, right. You work at the ministry too. Thankfully he didn't know much about magic, and just assumed that this was a normal thing. So, does your arm still hurt? I asked. The pain went away along with the bruise, he replied, much to my relief. I still wanted Maria to take a look at him, but at least it seemed that the worst was behind us. I can't fix your other wounds though. We'll need someone else to take care of those, I explained, looking at all the other non-magical bruises he still had because of his father. He shook his head. Forget about those. They're my own fault. I can't just forget about it. You're all battered up, and I made you run on top of that. Also, it's not your fault that your father beat you up. In hindsight, his father had probably been so hard on him because Ronnie had tried to take him away from Dewey. Whether or not that was the case, Ronnie certainly wasn't to blame for his father's violence. He again declined. It is though. Anyway, you should stop worrying about me and go home. Aren't your friends waiting for you? However, I had no intention of giving up this time. No, I won't go home until I've seen your wounds treated and you and your brother having a proper discussion. What's your problem, girl? He looked shocked. I've already said I don't want him to have anything to do with us anymore. Because it'd weigh him down, right? Right. He doesn't need any of us ignorant, useless lot. You can't be so harsh with yourself. Forget about weighing him down. Dewey is proud of you, you know. Because I look after the others? I'm just doing that because nobody else would. He really doesn't want to admit it. Getting through to him isn't going to be easy. It's obvious how much you care about them, and you even took the risk to protect me, a stranger, before running for help despite how hurt you were. Normally you wouldn't do that for someone you'd just met a few minutes earlier. That was just in the heat of the moment. Even so, that's not something that just anybody would do. You're a great person. You're kind and strong, I declared, pumping my fists. She's right, a voice nearby called out. I looked in that direction and found Dewey, also pumping his fists, standing beside Maria. Oh, Maria brought him back. Way to go. You're always looking out for the rest of us. I know you work the hardest of all, and you don't even use the money you make for yourself. You use it for our siblings, because you're so kind. Dewey told his brother. How long have you been listening? Wondered Ronnie, half distressed and half embarrassed. Since you said that you don't want me to have anything to do with you anymore. I didn't know you thought you'd weigh me down or anything like that. Ronnie covered his face with his hand and let out a big sigh. Dewey had heard the part that his brother most wanted to hide. There's no point in hiding it since you've already heard it. It's just as I said. You fought your way out of this misery. The rest of us would just drag you down, so. That's not true. Dewey interrupted his brother. He was so passionate in saying those words that his face had turned red. That was the first time I ever heard Dewey yell. Despite his young age, he was always calm and collected. Why would you drag me down? If it weren't for you, I'd never have been able to join the ministry. Ronnie, slightly taken aback by his brother's outburst, replied, I didn't do anything. You were the one who put in all the effort. No way you didn't do anything. Back then, I was so intent on doing my best that I didn't even notice, but after I started working at the ministry and I could catch my breath, I realized just how much you supported me, Dewey countered, approaching his brother and taking his hands. You used to do part of my share of work, didn't you? How else would I be able to do a whole day's worth of work after coming back from school? Ronnie didn't answer, but the way he was blushing left little room for doubt. I respected you back then, and I respect you now. So don't say that you'd just drag me down. Dewey shouted at his brother. After standing in silence for a few moments, Ronnie finally replied. I've always been so proud of you. We all have. You scored a job that good even though nobody ever handed you anything. That's why we wanted you to be free to enjoy the life you deserve. Dewey started crying, but I suspected those probably weren't tears of sadness. I started studying and putting in all that effort because I wanted a better life for myself, it's true. But the only reason I kept at it was because I wanted a better life for you and all our other siblings too. Dewey. So, don't run away from me like that. Let's all leave that terrible life behind us. It seemed that Dewey's words had finally reached Ronnie's heart. You're right. The older brother nodded. Maria and I, deeply moved, were looking at them from the sidelines. They are such good brothers, she commented. Yes, I immediately agreed. Now that Dewey and Ronnie had finally overcome their misunderstandings, we could all go back to their house. The two brothers apparently wanted to talk with all the rest of their siblings. That makes sense. Even though they know they have each other's backs, they really have to do something about those parents. They're the cause of all the problems in that family. Even if all the kids got away with Dewey's help, that deadbeat dad of theirs could come after them. Maria and I told Dewey to ask us for help if he needed anything, and he said that he would. It seemed that today's events had changed him for the better, teaching him that it was okay to rely on others. When we reached his home, I was ready to fight their horrible father with all the strength I had in me, but I was met by a surprising scene. Hey! Dewey's dad was nowhere to be seen. Instead, all of his siblings were cleaning up the house, helped by a bunch of people I'd never seen before. Since Larna was giving them orders left and right, they were probably her subordinates. Miss Larna? What is happening? A befuddled Dewey inquired. Oh, Dewey, she replied with a serious face, I heard that your parents couldn't find a job, so I found one for them. The employer will provide their accommodation, and they were to start immediately, so I sent them on their way. They'll be busy for a while, so if you want to contact them, just go through me. That all sounded wonderful, except for how it was obviously a lie. Dewey's parents forced their children to work so that they didn't have to, so I was sure that Larna was to blame for their alleged sudden change of heart. However, despite noticing how suspicious that story sounded, Dewey didn't seem in the least bit concerned. If anything, he looked relieved to find out that his parents had basically been kidnapped. That reaction told you everything you needed to know about what he thought of them, and all of his siblings also looked more relaxed than earlier. "And why are my siblings cleaning up?" Dewey asked. "So they can leave," answered Larna casually. "Leave? They're leaving the house. Can't have them stay here on their own now that your parents are away working, can we? I heard that one of your brothers is of age, but looking after this many children would be too much for him. I'm having them move to an apartment managed by the ministry, where they'll be looked after as needed," she explained as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Those children had been living here basically on their own for their whole lives, but Larna, who wasn't going to stand for that, had immediately arranged for them to move. She really was a capable superior. "But we don't have enough money to move," Ronnie had gone pale with fear. "Don't worry, your parents are going to pay for that with their new job. And the ministry's lodgings aren't that expensive, so part of Dewey's salary will be more than enough. I'll even find you a real new job, if you want," Larna replied, leaving the young man shocked and almost unable to accept this much kindness. However, when Dewey lowered his head and thanked Larna, his brother seemed convinced, and he did the same. "Just leave it all to me," Larna assured them, sounding very pleased with herself. And so, it was decided that all of Dewey's siblings would move to a proper house, and Ronnie would also get a new job. That was sure to make Dewey feel very relieved too. After that discussion was over, I explained to Larna how we had run into Sarah and how she had hit Ronnie with a dark magic spell which I then removed. "How did she even find you? Does she follow your smell or something? Or is it magic?" This is very interesting. Larna had a point. Last time could have been a coincidence, but today Sarah had clearly been looking for me. "Do I smell that strong? From the way you say she ran away, she probably isn't going to come back all that soon. However, keep this for safety." She handed me something that looked like a small egg with a piece of string coming out of it. "If you're ever in trouble, pull on that string. The device will make a loud noise and another device which I have on me will notify me of it. Use that if Sarah comes at you again," she explained. "Oh, so it's just like the keychain alarms that kids used in my old world. She must have made this with magic. But, you know, I have to ask you," she continued, "you do have a familiar, right? Why don't you use that when you need help?" "Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about him." Again. Pokey, my dark familiar, was a very good boy. He would always come to the rescue, as long as I remembered to call out to him. Unfortunately, that almost never happened, since I tended to think of him as just a pet. "I will try to remember next time," I promised my superior, who was giving me the most dejected look ever. "Please do." "Even though I hope there will be no such next time," she replied with a deep nod. I was actually supposed to report all those happenings with Sarah to the ministry, but Larna, not wanting to keep me busy on my day off once again, offered to do it instead, based on what I'd told her. "But isn't it a day off for you too?" I asked. "Don't worry. It's basically a hobby for me," she replied. Both she and Maria looked at Ronnie's arm, and they found nothing wrong with it. The latter even fixed the rest of his wounds with her light magic, and Ronnie was extremely impressed and just as grateful. Along with Dewey, he was now going to help the rest of their siblings prepare to move. Maria and I wanted to help as well, but we were told that there were already more than enough people there, including those that Larna had called, and that we should just head back. "It's still a bit early to go home though," I observed, looking at the sun still high in the sky. "In that case, would you like to stop by my house?" Maria shyly suggested. "Of course. We've come all this way after all, and I bet you want to stop by too." I agreed, and so our next stop was decided. The two of us, accompanied by Poki, whom Larna had told me to call out just in case, headed toward Maria's house, this time walking on a proper paved street. The trail that Ronnie and I had been running on earlier was little more than a footpath through the forest, cleared to allow some construction work nearby. Poor Ronnie had to use that path to go to work every day. At least now Larna will introduce him to a proper job, and he won't have to worry about his other siblings as much. It's been a tough life for him, but I hope he'll be happy now. While thinking about the future of the Percy family and discussing it with Maria, we kept walking until we had almost reached her house. It's been so long since I last met your mother. I should have brought a present or something. I failed to mention this to you, but, given the time of the day, my mother is unlikely to be at home. She will probably be at work, Maria replied, looking troubled. Really? She won't be there. I think so. I am sorry I did not mention this to you earlier. Oh, don't worry. That's not a problem. But then, why do you want to go home? I had thought that the only reason she wanted to visit was to see her mom. I thought that maybe, my father might be there. Your father? I suddenly realized that, in all the time we'd known each other, I'd barely ever heard Maria mention her father. If he's home at this time of the day, does that mean he works nights? But wait, then why wasn't he home when I met Maria's mom? I had a few doubts, but Maria started speaking before I could voice any of them. Actually, I haven't really spoken with my father since my magic powers first appeared, she confessed. I was utterly surprised. She and her mother seemed to be on such good terms that I'd assumed the same was true for her and her father as well. Wasn't that a real long time ago? Yes. I was 5 years old at the time. That's pretty much her whole life. She's been living with this issue for more than a decade. Since both my parents are commoners, having a baby who could use magic made them the subject of a lot of unpleasant talk, she sadly explained. For the first time ever, I properly understood the circumstances around Maria's childhood. As a noble, having magic powers was a normal, good thing. Those around me praised me just for being born like that. However, that didn't apply to commoners, who usually had no magic. My brother Keith, for example, was born from an escapade between a nobleman and a commoner woman, and most people probably assumed that this was the case for Maria too. When I first visited this town, I noticed that everyone knew where Maria's house was. I thought that it was just a really close-knit neighborhood, but maybe the truth wasn't that pleasant. Maybe Maria's family was just treated like an object of gossip, given that a magical baby being born in a town this small was a very rare occurrence. And then my father stopped coming home, she continued, sadly lowering her face before quickly raising it again, this time with her eyes full of resolve. But seeing what happened with Dewey made up my mind. I must do something about this. I told Dewey that he has to speak with his family to properly understand the situation, but I lacked the courage to do so myself. However, I will not run away from the truth anymore. I want to try to speak with my father. Maria was a special person. Not only could she use light magic, but she effectively was the main character of this entire world. At the same time, she was just a girl the same age as me with all her troubles and fears. However, she was ready to face her weaknesses and move forward. This is what truly made her special. I can't do anything for you, but I'll be by your side, I told her, taking her hands into mine. Thank you. She smiled. When you are by my side, I feel like I could do anything. We kept walking, hand in hand, all the way to her house. Chapter 5, Father and Daughter, Divided. I, Maria Campbell, was walking toward my own home with newfound courage, courage given to me by the loving warmth of the hand that was holding my own. When my magic powers had appeared, my mother had started leaving the house less and less. It was Lady Katarina's visit during the Academy's summer vacation that had convinced her to break out from her hermitage. Thanks to her, on that day, I was able to have a proper conversation with my mother. There will be no this inserted audio clip if you buy the software license key or activation key. This helped us mend our relationship, and now our bond was as strong as it ever was. As things between us improved, my mother even started working at a bakery. She only did so a few days per week initially, but she gradually increased them and was now working almost every day. One day, coming back home from her job, she had told me with a smile how fun and fulfilling it was for her. Moreover, she was able to make friends in the workplace, and on her days off she would even go out into town with them. My mother had changed a lot in the span of a couple years, but my father had still not come back. He would occasionally send money to help us with our expenses, but he never showed up in person. I had thought that my father hated me. I was sure that he did not want to see me. But the letter I recently received from my mother made me think that maybe this was not the case. Truth be told, I had already had my suspicions before that. Now that my mother had started working, neither she nor I were subject to as many nasty rumors as before. At first, they would blame her for giving birth to a magic-wielding child, saying that she had been unfaithful to my father. Now, instead, many people had come to sympathize with us, blaming the man who would get drunk and then cause trouble at the tavern or pass out on the streets my father. He used to hate liquor. Why had he started drinking so much? Was it because of the rumors? Or was it something else? So far, I had never tried to find a definite answer to those questions. However, recently, I had received a letter from my mother in which she told me about how a friend of hers had seen my father. He had apparently come home while my mother was away to leave some money there. As he did so, he had a newspaper cutting in his hands. The article he had cut was the one mentioning my enrollment at the ministry. Did my father not hate me? Did he actually care about me? I could not help but wonder. At the same time, I feared that, if I asked him, he would tell me that he did indeed hate me. This thought had kept me from facing the truth for so long, but I did not want to cower any longer. I had found the courage I needed, thanks to seeing Dewey and his brother clear up their misunderstandings and to the things that Lady Katarina had told me. Today was the same day of the month as the one on which my father had been seen delivering the money to our house. He had probably done so during his lunch break from work, which was probably around this time of day. I could not be certain that he would come. Maybe last time he had just happened to pass by. Of course, I could just go to his workplace and be sure to find him, but I had never been there and definitely lacked the courage to go. If he does come. Once I reached home, I saw him there. It was as if fate had chosen this day for me to talk to him. I called out to him from a distance. Dad. He turned around, and I saw that he looked much older than I remembered. After all, it had been more than a decade since I had last seen him. Maria, was all that he said. He then stared at me with his mouth open in surprise. He probably wasn't expecting to see me there. What are you doing? I asked him, and his face twitched as he struggled to come up with an answer. I was just passing by. See you then, he replied, already trying to leave. I cannot let him go. I barely talked to him. Without thinking about it, I strengthened my grip around Lady Katarina's hand, and she did the same in return. I looked at her, and she nodded at me as if to say, "You can do it." I can. If she is with me, I can do anything. Wait, Dad. He stopped, and I walked toward him by myself. I was no longer holding my friend's hand, but the courage she had given me was still with me, and I needed it to look my father straight in the eye. I thought you never came back home because you did not want to see me, I told him, and he seemed surprised to hear this. Oh, of course not, he stuttered. My fear that he really did hate me disappeared, and relief took its place. I heard that the people in town have started blaming you instead of me and Mom. Are you doing this on purpose? Are you pretending to get drunk and pass out on the streets to deflect the gossip's attention from the two of us? I asked him. I had been considering that possibility since I had first heard about the situation from my mother. My father was never a drinker, and in fact, a sip of liquor was enough to make him fall asleep. I could not imagine him drunkenly causing trouble at the tavern. Furthermore, despite this supposedly debauched lifestyle of his, he was still managing to deliver us money every month. None of it made any sense. As my mother started working again, I was able to find out more about what was actually happening, and I immediately suspected that things were not as they appeared. I believed that my father was just putting on an act so that the ill rumors would focus on him instead of Mom and me. Hearing my question, he first looked surprised, and then somewhat dejected. Looking at his face confirmed my suspicions, and I took his hand. "Dad, you don't need to do that anymore. Mom and I both have friends that trust and understand us now." My mother's new friends knew what kind of person she was, and they found the rumors about her alleged affair with a nobleman ridiculous and infuriating. She had told me that now she finally felt understood, unlike back when some people had started avoiding her when those rumors began circulating. I, too, had many wonderful friends including, first and foremost, Lady Katarina. I glanced at her, and so did my father. She greeted him with a nod, and he did the same. I could tell just how relieved he felt. Before attending the Academy of Magic, I had always been alone. I was happy to finally be able to introduce a friend of mine to my father. "And we are both stronger now," I proudly told him. My mother and I no longer feared rumors. No matter what people said, we were ready to go on with our lives. "So, please, come back home, Dad," I pleaded, firmly gripping his hand. He stared at me silently for a moment. "I will," he answered as he gripped mine with his big, strong hands. I saw the tears welling up in his eyes, and I felt like crying as well. He told me that he had to go back to work for today, and I had to go back to my room at the ministry as well, but we promised to meet the next time I had a day off. Lady Katarina, who had been listening the whole time, was crying harder than either of us. "That's so sweet. I be so glad," she blubbered, sharing all of my happiness. "Thank you so much. I would not have been able to do this if it were not for you," I told her, and she sprang forward to hug me. Her embrace felt incredibly warm and undeniably kind. Sniff. Sniff. "Are you all right?" "Yes, thank you. I feel much better now," I answered, blowing my nose in my handkerchief. I had just learned about Maria's family situation, and seeing the love that she and her father shared for each other had moved me so much that I'd started crying harder than either of them. I cried so much I even made Maria worry about me. Her father had to leave for work, but, before doing that, he commented that, "I see that you've made some good friends." If that was his way of describing the weird wailing girl grasping at his daughter, I figured that he was a really kind and understanding man. Had it been my mother, she would have scolded me for having my face covered in tears and snot in public. After calming down, I followed Maria inside her house, where she made me a cup of hot tea. "Thank you so much, Maria." While I was sipping my tea, my friend was writing a letter to her mother, telling her what had just happened. Maria said that she wouldn't be able to tell her in person, since she always came home very late. She seems to be enjoying her work so much that she keeps at it until the evening, she explained, sounding very happy as she did so. I hoped that she would soon start sounding like that when talking about her dad too. You know, it's hard to believe with all that's happened, but it's still early in the afternoon. I wonder if we should just go home, I pondered. Our original plan was to go shopping in the castle town, but what I actually did was go to Dewey's house, get attacked by Sarah in the forest, check back in on the Percy children, and meet Maria's dad. I felt kind of exhausted already, and, come to think of it, I hadn't even had lunch. My brain informed my stomach of this sudden realization, receiving a loud growl in response. I actually had made plans about what restaurant to go to, and I was looking forward to stuffing myself with desserts. Cakes, cookies, ice cream, and. Ugh, just thinking about those made me even hungrier. Actually, you know what? Why don't we go and have a few sweets before heading back home? I suggested, and Maria, giggling at the sound that my stomach was making, quickly agreed. Okay, here we are. Our inconspicuous carriage had safely brought us to the fanciest part of the capital, the one closest to the castle. Actually, before setting out for the capital, I was so hungry that I couldn't resist and bought some bread from a bakery close to Maria's house. It was so good that, if it had been closer to my house, I would have probably become a regular. However, since I also wanted to enjoy the sweets from downtown, I made sure not to make myself full with just that. It wasn't easy, but I restricted myself to just a few kinds of bread. Now, Maria, let's decide which shop we should go to first. Yes. Oh, now that I think of it. Do you still want to buy that tea I talked to you about? Maria asked, reminding me of the tea that allegedly relieved drowsiness, which was actually the whole reason I'd decided to go shopping in the first place. Right. Buying that was the whole point. Let's go buy that before focusing on the sweets then. Maria guided me to the store where she had found the tea in question, and right outside, we saw a familiar face. Here you are, finally. I thought you wouldn't come at all, or that maybe I'd missed you, Alan brazenly greeted us as he sent off a white bird that had been perched on his hand. What? Why are you here? And what's with that bird? I heard that you would be shopping downtown, but since you weren't coming, I found one of the shops you'd be likely to go to and remained on the lookout near it. The bird is to signal that I've found you, he replied. Oh, I see. No, wait, I don't. First of all, how did you know I'd be coming into town? Well, that's not so important. Anyway, everyone's dying to see you, he said, and, just as he did that, I saw yet another familiar face running in my direction. It was Mary, who jumped at me and quickly hugged me. Lady Katarina. I'm so glad I was able to see you. I couldn't come here before lunch, so I was worried we wouldn't be able to meet at all. It's been a while since I've last met her, but I'm glad to see she hasn't changed one bit. She kept saying, Lady Katarina. Lady Katarina, embracing me with her sensually curvaceous body, until someone dragged me out of her arms from behind. I ask that you refrain from hugging my fiancé in public, Lady Mary. And you, Alan, do something about your own fiancé instead of just staring. Prince Jedward. I exclaimed, surprised that Mary and Alan weren't the only ones there. We are here too, Sophia chimed in, popping up out of nowhere with Nicole behind her. She looked as cute as always, and her brother's smile was as potent as I'd come to expect. Ugh, his attractiveness is out in full force today, I thought, trying to catch my breath as I barely resisted his charm. Except for a certain somebody who is so obsessed as to have come here first thing in the morning, bringing his work with him, we actually all gathered not long ago, Keith, also appearing out of nowhere, smirked. He looked kind of sweaty, which just made him even sexier than usual. Has nobody ever introduced you to the concept of efficiency in one's work, Keith? As your future brother-in-law, I would be happy to teach you. I politely decline the offer in consideration of how I have no plans of becoming your brother-in-law. While Jedward and Keith went at it as they usually did, Sophia came closer to me and explained what was going on. We all wanted to meet you, even for just a little while, so we did our best to finish our work early. I thought they all had a day off. I'm flattered they'd do something like that for me. Well, why don't we all go and have sweets together? I suggested, and everyone quickly agreed. As for the tea, my friends had already bought it for me beforehand. I gratefully accepted it and looked forward to drinking it before the start of my next afternoon shift. We all walked into a pastry shop, and I couldn't help but feel that our group, despite everyone's best attempts to dress down to the level of townsfolk, was extremely conspicuous. All my handsome and beautiful friends were getting quite a lot of stares. Wow! They all look so delicious. He. We should order several and then share them between us, Lady Katarina. That's a wonderful idea, Mary. Let's do that. Do not forget about us. Of course. We can share them between the four of us. Since there were so many of us, we had to split, the boys at one table and the girls at another. I came here specifically to be with Katarina. Why do I have to sit here with 3 other men? I'm afraid there is no other option now. Please have some of this cake, Your Highness. Oh, this is pretty good. You have cream on your face, Prince Alan. Here, take my kerchief. Thanks, Keith. As I've said before, I think that you would really make a great mother, Keith. As I've said before, I'm a man, Nicole. Judging from what I could hear, the boys were having fun at their table too. As I took a brief pause from eating, Mary asked me a question. Incidentally, Lady Katarina, where have you been up until now? I realized that, in my excitement at seeing my friends after so long, I'd forgotten to tell them about all that had happened during the morning. I gave a very cursory explanation of how we'd run into Dewey and gone to his home. I'd been attacked with dark magic, Dewey had made up with his brother, and Maria had made up with her dad. Mary held her head in her hands. I'm sorry, but that recounting raised more questions than it answered. May I ask you for some more details, Maria? Was I that bad at telling the story? Maria, after giving both me and Mary a slightly concerned look, masterfully retold all that had happened. The boys also came next to our table to listen. Once Maria was done with the story, my friends took turns at expressing their dismay. Katarina, you really cannot help yourself, can you? Big sister, what am I going to do with you? Lady Katarina. There you go again. Lady Katarina. Katarina. I thought I did great today. Why are they mad at me? And so, several appalled remarks later, my day off was over. I, Susanna Randall, known as Larna Smith, had just finished reporting to the ministry and helping out the family of my subordinate Dewey Percy with moving to a new home. I made my way to the quarters of Geoffrey Stewart, my fiancé and main supporter and collaborator. I knocked on the door, and he told me to come in with his usual nonchalant tone. It's me, I called out as I entered, finding him behind his desk face to face with stacks of papers. Contrary to what one may think due to his casual attitude and apparent lack of motivation, he was a fast and effective worker. There were many people who thought he was the most fit candidate to succeed the king, but he had no interest in taking the crown. I finished my report on the matter I told you about earlier, I explained, handing the document to him. He commented once he had quickly skimmed through it, this seems to be more or less what you told me earlier. Still, I feel for Lady Katarina. She is involved in the worst kind of incidents with such regularity that you would think she is cursed. Quite so. Not that she seems to notice, or care. Katarina remained happy and fearless despite the tremendous number of misfortunes she was subjected to, including, for example, the recent dark magic run-in near the orphanage. I could not help but worry about her, and I imagined that her many loving friends were at least as worried. For the time being, I gave her a magic tool to call me for help. I also instructed her to rely on her dark familiar, but whether she will follow that depends on her, I continued, referring to the beast that lived in her shadow. It could transform into a giant wolf, making for a very powerful ally. Unfortunately, she had come to see this creature of darkness as a cute little pet, therefore forgetting about its usefulness in battle. It was a terrible waste, albeit unsurprising considering her personality. We should look into having someone keep watch over her from the metaphorical shadows then. However, it would be better to consult with Duke Clays first, as he may have already hired someone to do just that, Geoffrey replied, handing me back the report. I must say. It seems you weren't as cool-headed as usual this time, he added. A trace of concern appeared on his face. Yes, I'm fully aware of that. I knew very well that using magic on a civilian was not something to be done lightly. However, when I had Dewey's father in front of me, I could not help myself. The way that man treated his children as tools got under my skin. Only two things were able to elicit emotional responses from me: the mysteries of magic, and parents who used and abused their children. The latter was probably because of my own upbringing. My father, Marquis Rendell, was a man who was exclusively interested in his social advancement. Wives and children were but tools meant to turn a profit and aid the achievement of his own goals. Love was not part of the equation. He had chosen my late mother as his wife because of her high social status, or so I had heard, and as soon as illness overtook her weak body, she was relegated to a guest house, where she passed away without ever seeing her husband again. As a child, my remarkable intelligence allowed me to fulfill my father's wishes, to the point that I was eventually chosen as the prince's fiancé. However, once my mother died, I realized that I no longer wanted to live as a puppet in the Marquis's hands, and I started defying his orders. This led to him hating me so profoundly that he wanted to have me disposed of, something which he could not easily do because of my engagement to Geoffrey. Even now, in his constant quest to be rid of me, the Marquis kept suggesting to the prince that he marry one of the other Rendell daughters instead. Having been raised by such a man, I had no tolerance for parents who behaved in similar ways, and it took active restraint on my part not to kill them on the spot. I cannot blame you for that, Geoffrey, who was privy to my situation, replied with a shrug. Right after that, it didn't take much digging to uncover just how terrible those parents were, I explained. Dewey's mother was just as despicable, giving birth to child after child, leaving them in the care of their older siblings and enjoying her life without a single worry. While her husband's means of entertainment seemed to be gambling and drinking, her main pastime was one enjoyed while laying down in a bed. I was not sure how many of those children actually belonged to the man they called father. The children lived for each other, devoting themselves to helping their siblings, I continued, thinking back at Ronnie's attempt to protect his younger brothers and sisters. Unlike me, I had a few half-siblings born of a different mother, but I barely knew anything about them. All I could infer about them was that they were treated even worse than me, since being born of a concubine surely made them less valuable in the eyes of our father. Owing in no small part to Geoffrey's collaboration, I had considerably expanded my power in the past few years, but I was yet to reach the point where I could openly oppose the Marquis. As such, I felt I could do nothing to help my siblings. I can't do anything, I muttered, looking down at my hands. The sound of my younger half-sister crying how she wanted to live by her own means echoed in my memory. I felt sorrow, something I was not used to. At that moment, Geoffrey gently pulled my head toward him and against his chest. Maybe now you can't, but you just need to become more powerful. Isn't that what we're working so hard for? He said gently, hugging me. The warmth and smell of his large chest healed my dejected heart. You're right. Thank you, I answered, and he started caressing my hair. I stood still, enjoying his embrace a while longer. Welcome back, Sarah. When I returned, still disgruntled because of Katarina Clay's, my master greeted me. I replied with a bow, but I couldn't help but keep my eyes on the man standing next to him. It's been a while, hey, the second man remarked with a smile, noticing my glance. Now you even go outside by yourself? That's unusual. I'd like to hear what brought about this change. I looked away from him. I hated the way he looked at me from the darkness, as if I was an animal on which he was ready to experiment. There has been no change, and I have nothing to tell you, I replied tersely. Don't worry, it won't take that long. He ignored my absolute rejection, and then my master intervened. I would like to hear your report first, he said to the man. And you, Sarah, may leave. It is your day off after all. Relieved, I quickly left the room. I knew that I should have reported about finding Katarina, but I was too exhausted to do so. I lay down on my bed, curled up, and soon fell asleep. After my very eventful day off, it was time to go back to work. When I got out of my carriage and walked past the magical ministry's gates, I noticed Dewey and Sora walking together. It was normal for newcomers to come to work early, but I'd never seen just the two of them together like that, so I curiously approached them. "Good morning, Sora, Dewey." "Morning," Sora answered with his normal curtness. "Good morning," Dewey replied with a huge smile. I was happy to see him smiling after all he'd been through the previous day. "Thank you so much for yesterday," he then told me, lowering his head. "Not at all. I didn't do anything," I demurred, but he shook his head. "The things that happened only did so because of your help. My siblings and I are all grateful." Being thanked so openly had got me blushing, and Sora, noticing that, was silently sneering at me. "It's rare for the two of you to walk to work together," I observed, trying to change the topic. "Sora helped me with moving yesterday, and today I went to his room to thank him, so we decided to come to work together," Dewey explained. "You moved already?" Dewey had already told me that he would eventually move in with the rest of his brothers and sisters, who now lived in a proper apartment, but I hadn't expected for him to leave the ministry dorm so soon. "Not yet. I was just preparing." Sora noticed me having trouble packing all of my things by myself, and he offered to help. "I mean, I could tell you weren't used to that kind of thing. It's not like I did anything huge." "You're really polite though, going out of your way to thank me for something like that," Sora commented. "Oh, I owed you as much." Sora, even though he could sound harsh at times, was actually a very kind guy, and Dewey seemed to have quickly taken a liking to him. "So you'll move in with the rest of your family soon? Have you seen their new place already?" I asked Dewey. "Yes. It's a clean, nice house, and all the neighbors are also from the ministry, which makes it extremely safe. I cannot thank Miss Larna enough," he replied enthusiastically. "That's a huge step up from that shack they were living in. I'm so glad for them." "Good morning, everyone," a cute voice greeted us from behind. "Oh, Maria." "Good morning," I responded, and Dewey and Sora quickly followed. She was always as beautiful as you'd expect from a game's protagonist, but today she looked particularly radiant, possibly because of how things had gone with her dad on the previous day. "I'm glad to be able to see all of you so early in the morning." Her smile was so adorable that if I were a man I'd already have been on a knee asking for her to marry me. Dewey's red face hinted that he was probably thinking the same thing. As for Sora, I couldn't really tell. He looked the same as usual, but that didn't prove anything since he was so good at hiding what he really felt. While I looked at my two male friends, I noticed that Sora gave Dewey a slight slap on the shoulder. What was that for?" "Maria, thank you so much for yesterday," Dewey started speaking. "My siblings and I are all grateful." He said the exact same words to me, but this time it feels different. His eyes look twice as wide, and kind of moist too. That's not really like him at all. He then went on to say something that he definitely had not said to me. I would like to take you out to eat as a way to thank you when you have the time." "What's this?" He's asking her out. "Who are you and what did you do with Dewey?" Sora, noticing how I was staring at Dewey with my mouth agape, whispered something into my ear. "I also taught him how to ask older girls out yesterday." "How dare you taint pure, sweet, innocent Dewey like that?" I whispered back. "I just gave him some advice. He told me he's got a crush on an older girl. But he'd never act like that on his own." "I know, so I told him that looking all cute and defenseless works wonders with older girls. He's got that sweet face, but he didn't know how to use it right. That's like a straight punch to a girl's maternal instinct. Maybe Sora is a bad influence on him. Now I wonder if it'll work on Maria though." She looks surprised. "Yes. I would love to. She said yes. They're going on a date. Maria's going on a date all alone with a boy. I was happy to see Maria finally get involved in romance, but at the same time I couldn't shake away a certain kind of loneliness. Then we shall decide the date, she continued with a smile. When are you free, Lady Katarina? It took me a moment to process those words. Hey! Oh, did you not hear that? Dewey offered to take us out to eat. When would you be available? I'll have to check my schedule. Do you mind if I get back to you later? Of course. We could discuss it further during lunchtime, she replied. I couldn't find the courage to tell her that the you and Dewey's take you out to eat was a singular you. The poor misunderstood boy was visibly saddened, while Sora was laughing with pretty much no restraint or respect. I'm sorry, Dewey. We all kept walking together, and, when we reached their department, we split up from Maria and Dewey, promising to meet again at lunchtime. Dewey still looked quite sad. That girl can be pretty thick too, hey, Sora chuckled to himself. Wait. Too? Who else is supposed to be thick? Left with that mystery, I decided to warn Sora not to give Dewey any more questionable advice. The weather's really good today. All right. Let's get on with work.